you. This is the Prop S Subcommittee. For anyone out there watching, this is a bit less formal than our typical meetings. Typically, these subcommittees have been held behind closed doors in order to be more transparent this year. We, as a Board of Aldermen, decided to put these up on STL TV and open them to the public. What we're going to be doing today is hearing from Serena Mohammed about the process that we're undertaking, that they are undertaking, excuse me, as the contractor on the Prop S project, and members of the subcommittee will be able to answer or ask any questions. I believe that there's some additional aldermen on the Zoom call that we can also hear from. But at this point, I will turn it over to Ms. Mohammed in order to start her presentation.
I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear anyone in the room.
Oh, well, that's not good. STL TV, is there...
I believe we're still waiting on a quorum.
Okay.
So the meeting hasn't begun.
Thank you.
No. Yeah, it looks like hers says muted on the TV. Bless you. So the host. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then we'll just restart here. So I was saying that these are less formal meetings for anyone watching, less formal meetings, and that traditionally these meetings have been held, these subcommittee meetings have been held behind closed doors, but in order to increase the transparency, we wanted to both live stream them as well as make them open to the public. Today we're going to be hearing from Serena Mohammed on the application process, where we're at with it, and also do some question and answer with members of the subcommittee, as well as I believe there's at least one other alderman on the phone call, on the Zoom call. And if there's any questions, we'll get into it. And with that, I'll let Ms. Mohammed start her presentation.
All right. So essentially, there are two things that I wanted to describe. The first is how we selected the community reviewers, kind of who they are, and then what the review process entailed, so what they actually completed over the last week. And then I have some information just to pass along for your consideration from the staff at the Office of Violence Prevention. And as you mentioned, I have a few questions for the committee on how you want to receive this information going forward. So just so folks know, the St. Louis Mental Health Board conducts community reviews for lots of different funds, our own as well as some of our peer funders. And we established a joint portal with the Office of Violence Prevention last year just to have ongoing reviewer recruitment. And one of the reasons that we do that is to ensure that people are not signing up to review for a particular fund. And that kind of helps us make sure that we don't end up stacking the deck in favor of a particular organization. So in this application portal, we received 78 applications from city residents who wanted to participate in a community review. And for this particular review, we selected 9 based on the number of proposals that were received. And we filtered that list, that 78, by a few factors. First, looking at parenting status. If folks responded that they are the parent of a person that is 18 or under, a caregiver or a family member, then we selected those filters. And as well as the filter of folks who self-identified as having experience with gun violence. We also looked at other factors like neighborhood distribution to make sure that not all of the reviewers are from one area. And the review applications that we received came in between November and February. So this is not folks who just signed up right when this particular RFP was issued. When we looked at the neighborhood distribution, we had a reviewer from Dutchtown, Kingsway East, Hamilton Heights, Academy Sherman Park, College Hill, Academy Fairground, and Penrose. Our youngest reviewer was 26, but the average age was 35. All of them self-identified as African American, and a few also identified as Latino. 1/3 of those who responded said that they have experience with incarceration in St. Louis City, either themselves or a family member. 1/3 have direct experience with gun violence, and all have experience accessing or receiving youth development, mental health services, or substance use treatment. It's important for us to look at the lived experience of the reviewers to make sure that they can actually evaluate the proposals and it's not just kind of conjecture. That's the difference between a community review and, let's say, a staff review. We want folks who are in the communities that will be served by these programs to really weigh in and give us their ideas on whether or not these programs might be effective. About half of the reviewers had no experience conducting a review, which is not a problem because we do a reviewer training and orientation, and we provide lots of support. And we're always trying to grow kind of that cohort of individuals who have gone through this experience so that they're available to do this in the future. And I'm just going to read one quote from our reviewer who identifies herself as an older adult. She says, as a working mother of 7, I raised all my children in St. Louis City, and it was the types of programs that we were able to evaluate that provided safe spaces and allowed my husband and I to work and provide for our family. Now my grandchildren and the other children in the community desperately need these programs. So everyone took this assignment very seriously. They all came with their personal investment in why they wanted to make sure they were being fair and thorough in their evaluation of these proposals. In the future, we would like to have even more gender and age diversity, and we have strategies for doing that. We also had each reviewer complete a conflict of interest disclosure and agree to confidentiality. And that essentially means that they're not discussing the proposal content with anyone outside of the review process. So those were the reviewers, and I think we had a pretty good group. The reviewer assignments, we received 35 proposals that needed to be evaluated. So each person would have ended up reading from 11 to 13, depending on which team they were assigned to. The teams did not know one another, so you wouldn't necessarily know who was reading the same proposal, and that helps minimize folks influencing each other's opinions or ideas. We really wanted each person to individually evaluate the proposal that they were reading. Some other things that we do for quality control, as I mentioned, half of the reviewers were new, but even for folks who have done this before, each review requires its own approach to make sure that folks understand the goal of this program. So I often tell folks, you can read a proposal and see an excellent idea that seems very solid, but it's not necessarily related to what this program is designed to fund. So you really have to filter against the criteria set in the RFP. You can have an excellent program that doesn't accomplish keeping young people or reducing their involvement in crime. So they're not mutually exclusive. And that was one of the things that the reviewers really had to practice in separating out a good program versus a good program that also meets the requirements of the RFP. So one of the things that we do as staff support is read every comment and score that the reviewers produce to check for accuracy and consistency. So what we're looking for is some reviewers will score, they're naturally generous, they like things, they give high points. Other reviewers are more harsh, and they may give very low points. And being harsh or generous in and of itself is not a problem. What we're looking for is consistency across that specific reviewer. And then we compare across reviewers what the average is, what ranked high for one versus what ranked high for all of them collectively. So it's important to know that in a review process, it's more than just tabulating scores. It's more than just saying this was the highest number. It's really looking at the comments, the justification, what people saw as strengths in a proposal. And sometimes they may see something that has potential and they flag that. So it may not be the highest scoring proposal, but there were some things in there that they think warrant further consideration. And they make note of that in their comments. I will say that based on score, on average, if something ranked high, it likely had a point value of at least 80 out of 100. So it is unlikely that a proposal can be completely poorly written or unclear and still be recommended. You usually have to have the ability to kind of communicate exactly what you're trying to get done, and then that lends to strengthening your score. So I have all of this information from the reviewers on what they thought about the proposals. What I intend to do is to provide you with a ranked list. So that ranking will show from the highest ranked or the highest prioritized all the way to the bottom. I will say that based on the information that I received from the Office of Violence Prevention, you have approximately $1.8 million available for FY25, and that's a result of moving funds that were unspent in FY24. So you have more than the 900,000 that you may have originally thought, but just based on the fiscal year. However, one of the things that the Office of Violence Prevention is asking you to consider is the number of contracts that they can effectively manage. So they're requesting that only 15 contracts be awarded due to the number of staff that they have to be able to maintain or manage these contracts for the year. And the contracts would start on July 1st and end on June 30th. So with that in mind, you will get the rank list of all of the proposals. It'll be clear which ones were the highest ranked. And then you can decide from there how many you want to award with that cap of 15 to take into consideration. Another thing to note is that we don't ask the reviewers to make recommendations on funding amounts, because that's usually something that's done in the contracting phase. So someone might propose a budget that is 105,000, and then in the contracting phase realize that maybe some of those costs were not eligible and end up with a contract for 97,000. So the reviewers won't say this is the amount that should be awarded. They just say based on the program design, these are the ones that we think have the most merit that should be prioritized. Any questions about that so far?
I'll open that up to the subcommittee and to any alderman on the call. Looks like first in seniority is Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Muhammad, for your immeasurable work in so many different spaces, including this one. The biggest question that popped out to me, unless I missed it, did you speak to how many? I know you said you would like for us to only look towards awarding 15, but did you say how many total proposals we have to date?
So we received 35. So we evaluated 35 proposals.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be looking forward to the list that you'll be putting together, and us continuing to have conversations as we move this program forward. Thank you.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
I have no questions. Thank you, Ms. Muhammad.
Vice Chair Aldridge.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Muhammad. Alderwoman Clark asked my question, so thank you.
All right. And I know we have Alderman Cohn on the call. Alderman Cohn, do you have any questions?
None at this time. Thank you.
Okay. I have just a couple of questions, and these just came up in our previous discussion on this that I'm not sure if you are aware of or not. So one of the things that we had discussed as a subcommittee was I shouldn't say as a subcommittee, as the Public Safety Committee, was the hope in being able to put some metrics in to track the success of programs that we're funding. And it seemed a bit unfair, a bit like we were moving the goalposts to ask places that we've previously awarded funds to at the very end, hey, can you give us some metrics on the success of your program? Moving forward, are we going to be putting into the contracts, or have you discussed putting into the contracts measures to track success, so that, you know, in the future, next year, the year after, so on and so forth, when we're looking to fund organizations, that we can ensure that we're funding organizations that do have a track record of success?
Yeah, so I will say one of the application questions is on data collection. So each applicant had to describe their current data collection processes, how they report on their outcomes, what type of evaluation results they've had to date, and how they would work with the Office of Violence Prevention for the required data collection for this particular contract. As far as the specific indicators, that normally happens in the contracting phase. So an organization can say, this is what we traditionally collect, this is the database that we use. And then that contracting phase, the Office of Violence Prevention might say, well, we also want you to collect this other metric. Or across the board, we want everyone to measure this particular thing. So they'll have some ability in that contracting conversation to figure out what's collected at what intervals and then how it's reported out.
Okay, that's great to hear. I know also in conversations with OVP, there was some discussion on, and I'm blanking on which one it was now, either moving from the calendar year to the fiscal year, or moving from the fiscal year to the calendar year based on the Board of Aldermen's schedule and then the schedule of these contracts that traditionally it's felt like a bit of a rush job at the Board of Aldermen because we have to get things out very quickly towards the end of our session rather than being able to really kind of dive into this process. And so these the next level of application addresses that.
So these awards would start on July 1st. So that would put them on the fiscal year.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that's that change, I think, that we were looking at. Okay, well then, I don't have any further questions. I guess, well, what are the next steps that we need moving forward?
Yep, so I have some questions for you
Oh, sure,
for the committee.
sure.
So my goal was to get you a list of ranked proposals by April 10th. It hasn't been communicated to me specifically what deadline you have for that, like when you need to have something from me. And I'd also like to know what specific information is useful to you in your deliberation. So I can give you the ranking of, you know, each proposal, but are there other things that you expect to see or want to know? Do you need me to come back for a future meeting to answer questions? What will help you make your decisions moving forward?
I think, and I can't speak for the whole committee here, but I think I at least believe that it would be helpful once we have the applications in hand and we're kind of sorting through and trying to figure out where the best fits for the funding are, to have you or someone who can help shed some light on that, I think would be helpful. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, what do you think?
I definitely agree with that. Just having the applications, and then having, I guess, where are we gonna find the deliberations or the notes or whatever from the committee, committee reviewers? So we'll have the applications, we'll have the ranked list. Will we have access to their comments at any point? If not, then we would definitely want you or somebody else that was involved in that conversation probably to be around. So if we had any specific questions that might arise, we could ask.
Yeah, I imagine we're going to be hearing from several good qualified organizations and have to make some decisions.
Yeah.
So absolutely. But yeah, Ms. Muhammad, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. No,
you're good. So I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Do you intend for everyone on the committee to read all 35 applications?
I know, I just speak from my past experience in it. We've been in a room and we've had all of the applications in front of us. We've actually had meetings, they weren't, and I love this, that it's transparent now and being live streamed, but those applicants even came in, presented to us as a committee. So if we're gonna go forward in this process where that's not gonna be the case, where we'll have, in my mind, we would have the applications, the list that you compile for us, what would be our additional, since in the past, again, we've had representation from the organizations that have come speak. If we're not gonna have that, I would want, again, you or somebody else that was in the part of that community reviewer process to be here, because inevitably something might get asked about an organization that we can't answer, but they might have answered it in the community reviewer process. Because
Okay,
I guess,
so this-
let me ask you this, let me caveat to that. Did you all speak, even the community reviewers, did they interact with representation from these organizations? Okay, that's probably where I'm getting mixed up at. Because in the past, we have literally had representation come before us from the organizations. So maybe that's the piece that I'm getting tripped up on.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
We don't have, so I guess I have a few clarifying questions. That we don't, is there a max number or a requisite number of organizations that we have to select? Or we just have to select within the budget?
We don't have to select any organization, I guess. The Office of Violence Prevention sounds like has asked for us to select up to 15.
Up to 15. And then, so I think maybe it's a process question for us. Do we want to narrow it? I mean, do we want to select from the whole pile? It sounds like the group is already, they've already ranked them. I mean, I think those are kind of questions for us. Like, are we going to have a cap? Do we want to make a recommendation of like our top 3, or, you know what I mean? Like, how are we not just how are we evaluating it, but ultimately, what are our parameters?
Well, so I think it's important to look backwards on this a little bit too. One of the things that we did decide as the Public Safety Committee was that we wanted to take some of the ability for individual alder people to pick specific entities and organizations. And so that's why we put it out for a bid for this scoring process, with the idea that we were going to at least rely heavily on the scoring process.
And we don't have I'm sorry, but we don't actually have a score. Is there a scoring process that's been created, or we just have basically a ranking?
Yeah, I'll let Ms. Muhammad answer that.
You all scored it,
Yeah,
but do we have a
so-
scoring process? Or did you come up with a scoring process for us?
So what we do is we take the RFP criteria. It already has points assigned to each section. And we developed an evaluation tool to allow the reviewers to know what to look for in each section based on the RFP criteria and the points. So if it's helpful, I can share my screen and show you the RFP. But the RFP is always the guide, because it's what we told applicants we wanted to see. And we make sure that we evaluate against that and not bring in anything that's just kind of extra that they wouldn't be expected to have included in their proposal. The other thing to think about is in the RFP, you talk about what the evaluation process is going to be. So traditionally, once you publish something, it's considered an agreement or an understanding with the applicant, so they know what to anticipate. So if you change the process after they have kind of entered in good faith, that could create some challenges, in justifying whatever your selections might be. Because in the RFP, it specifically says that you would that the proposals will be reviewed by community reviewers.
Absolutely. And that came directly from challenges that came from changing, to your point, Chairman Ryan Goldpost. And I'll just say, we have the equivalent of a score would be what we went by United Way in the past. But now I understand on a different processes, we're going in this direction, which again, I like the transparency project in this process. So
If I could just interject, no, that's helpful, Ms. Muhammad. I think what would it be helpful for me speak from me. of
Oh,
course, as
absolutely. Yeah.
Alderman looks at me over here. I think if you could either present or when we get the applications, I think it would be helpful for the public too if you summarized what those criteria were and what the community reviewers did so that I think we know it.
It's in the RFP.
Right, but we're gonna meet again to go to discuss the proposal?
Yeah, so we're gonna have it sounds like we should have the ranked proposals on or about April 10th. And at that point, this committee will be meeting and we'll be asking Ms. Mohammed or someone from OVP to come in and address any questions that we have regarding their ranking. Again, with the idea that we all have already agreed to rely pretty heavily on this ranking. That's not to say we're bound by this ranking, but the reason that we put it out to bid and spent money on it was to remove the idea even that individual aldermen may be advocating for specific things because it's in their ward or it's
They have a
that they
connection.
know the guy or whatever, rather than it being the best proposal out there to help the people of the city the most.
No, I get it. That's helpful. I was just thinking it might, I'll look at it. Obviously, Serena, you know me, so we've worked on a few things before. I think it would be helpful for the public if we're going to have another public hearing to just kind of give a baseline of, hey, here's what the community did. Here are the criteria you can see it on page X. I think so that when we have this transparent public review process, that the public clearly understands that there was a set of criteria that was evaluated and how we got to these rankings.
And yeah, I mean, we can certainly start off by going over the RFP, which contains the criteria that they were judging any application on. What I want to make sure that we avoid, though, is saying, oh yeah, but also this, or actually I don't care about that metric as much because this is what we put forward to the organization. So I don't want to change things up on them
No, I agree.
after they have put the time, money, and energy in to fill out the applications.
I agree, not changing it, but I do want to make sure that our voice and our advocacy, especially if it is for an organization that's doing amazing work within our wards and our spaces, it has value in it, and it shouldn't be looked upon as nefarious or a bad thing for us to be able to be here and advocate, because that also goes both ways. There might be an organization that ranked high, but we know as alders, because we're on the ground in our communities, we know that they might not necessarily, they look good on paper, but they're not doing the work or they're not something. So that's why I love this partnership, again, and it's more transparent process than this. But I do want to, if I don't want to silence our voice in an effort to make it seem like we don't want to be involved as alders, because I know for a fact that there are some amazing organizations out here that might have even needed assistance in back office and might not have scored right. But if we can prove and show that they are doing work and working over something else, then better rather in relations to the community than another organization that had great grant writers and great back office that were able to put a proposal together, then I think that we as alders should hold in our responsibilities to that and advocate for them.
I agree with you, and one of the things that I believe we've laid out in this application process that we haven't had in the past is the dollar amount ask. Because for some entities, if I say, well, I asked for $50,000 and you give me $10,000, that's absolutely meaningless to me. I can't actually accomplish the goal. But on some entities, $10,000 would be massive and make the difference in between it being a viable project or not. So I think it's also important to take those things into account, and hopefully we are moving towards that.
So one thing that's important to note based on Alderwoman Shameen Clark-Hubbard's comment, there is a way in the future for you to do like a joint review team process. So we do that with many of our other funds where we have trustees, staff, and community reviewers all together in one review process. So you're able to kind of discuss how you arrive at a particular evaluation, reach consensus on something, and that does allow kind of equal voice between all of those parties. That was not what we did with this because we were requested to just do a community review. So my caution is to not abandon what you put in the RFP and proposed and what people in community are expecting for this round, but perhaps in the future for the next round, if you really want to make sure that the committee is more involved in the review process, that you actually create joint review teams that includes members from this committee as well as community members and perhaps even staff from different departments, whatever you think the subject matter expertise that you might need to bring into the process. But it becomes tricky when you put out a process and then change it.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mrs. Muhammad, for being here and all your hard work on that. And I think that comment is helpful because I do hear and agree with the alderwoman from the 6th Ward, far as the next time we have this meeting, since we are trying to do this transparently, to be able to lay out what that process look like so that the community is aware, but also hear the alderwoman from the 10th Ward about, just because we advocate for an organization that, we are kind of the boots on the ground. And one thing that she said is, some organization has better grant writers than others. But just because they have better grant writers don't mean that and I'm not shooting down any organization, right? But the work that is necessary in those wards, some of those organizations may be really good boots on the ground, but not maybe great at filling out the application. So, I do look forward to, as we move forward, maybe in the future, having that kind of partnership, as you call it. I didn't know that we could do that, but I do think alderman voices it is important to the process of selecting individuals, as well as the next meeting. Hopefully we can figure out what those requirements are, because I hear them and I haven't seen the RFP unless it was sent out, and maybe it was and I missed the email. But just to know what those requirements are that that we've asked people, not to change the goalposts, but just to see those so that this committee is aware of it as well. So I appreciate all your hard work.
And just one other thing that was added with this process is technical assistance. So anyone who applied had access to technical assistance, which included grant writing.
Yeah, and that was a huge thing that I believe Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and I talked about with Mr. Pickney, was to try and level the playing field there more in between the people who have the ability to grant write and those who are trying to put together something solid for their community, but maybe don't have the funds or desire to engage a grant writer specifically for their purposes. There was money out of these funds set aside to help individual entities do that.
I think we should make sure we note to keep the spirit of Prop S funds originally through our former Clerk Kennedy, and he tells the story was for organizations that typically wouldn't have the back office and the grant writers. It was to put the money back directly on the ground in the community for these organizations that are doing the work. So I love that the community is involved now in the process, but I do want to make sure again that we are able to advocate for the ones that we know are not doing the work.
Absolutely. Does anyone have any, or do you have anything further for us, Ms. Mock?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clear on next steps. Do you have a date already in mind for when you're going to reconvene for your decision making, that the one that you want me to attend? Or someone?
I don't at this point. It will be after that April 10th date, certainly. I will have to get with Mr. Pinkney and figure out the the time constraints. I know there are some time constraints. I just don't know them off the top of my head. But we'll make sure that we move at the pace that we need to in order to clear all the hurdles that we need to in a timely fashion.
Do you intend to discuss proposals by name, or do you need some type of application number assigned?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I like the idea of, some sort of anonymous scoring on it. What do you all think?
I agree with that. I mean, I think at least, yes, especially in a public setting, and if we're kind of going back and forth so that we're essentially blind to the,
Yeah.
we continue the conflict free or the try to be as objective as possible.
Yeah, I know the state utilizes, blind scoring on a lot of things where they're giving out things, licenses, contracts, things like that. And I think it does help to control for some of the, well, I like this one because that's my brother-in-law's company or whatever, But is there any opposition to doing that?
No, I'm fine with that. And again, I echo in the next meeting, if we could get a copy of the RFP or whatever that looks like, that would be helpful.
I'll try and get you a copy of the RFP before we're even at the next meeting, so you have it. I know it was up on the city's website, but I'll make sure that you have it.
Yeah. And if the whole committee could
Yeah,
get
yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely. No, I'll just see if we can upload it to the drive for the subcommittee so that everyone has access to it whenever they see fit.
And do you also want access to all of the applications?
Yes, I think that would be helpful. But I guess if we were going to have that access to the applications and we were looking at that anonymized, if we could get them in some sort of blind fashion.
So I will say I'm offering something that the Office of Violence Prevention would actually be doing. So I don't know what process they might have to be able to facilitate that. My initial comment was about how you discuss the proposals.
Oh,
So what
okay,
we normally do with our trustees is they have a list, they know who they are, but because it's a public meeting, they might say application number 10 instead of saying, Joe's Gym, so that folks that are in the public might not hear something that could be construed as negative if there's some harsh criticism or something like that.
Okay. I get you. Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines like, applicant number 10 is what we would be looking at. But yeah, I guess either way, if there's an easy way to anonymize them, that could be helpful. If that's not possible at this point, maybe that's something that we look towards moving forward.
I will say, just based on the way the application material was submitted, it's probably not going to be easy because I don't think you're using a grant platform where people are doing direct entry. It's folks uploading attachments. So everyone's
Sure.
application material looks different. So you might have one organization that has 10 documents, another organization has one. It just depends on how they submitted it.
Okay, yeah, and this is at least the discussions thus far have been this is a moving process to try and make this process better. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm still very much in a learning mode on it. This is the first year where I've been the chair and trying to oversee it. So I'm trying to make improvements from where we've been at with it. But that certainly works for me, and maybe that's something that we look towards changing as we move forward.
Okay.
But I also do like the idea, as you've brought up, that if we're discussing any applicant in a more public light, that it does make sense to maybe save our criticisms for applicant X rather than Joe's Gym or whatever. So that point is very well taken. Anything further for us?
One other thing I can offer for folks who are interested, Alderman Aldridge's comment made me think about this. The training that I conducted for the community reviewers is 1 hour. If you're interested in watching the training so that you can see the instructions that they were given, how they use the evaluation tool, what to look for, that kind of thing, I can certainly send that to anyone who wants to see it, as well as the slide deck that was used for that training, because it may be helpful for you to know how they evaluated, not just what the RFP questions are.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful if you could get that to the clerk, and I'm happy to coordinate with you on that, or with Ingracio or Mr. Pinckney. Happy to do that. I think that'd be helpful to have on the drive as well, just so that we can use it as a reference point, both now and moving forward as we go through this process in future years as well.
I agree 100% with that too. I love that idea. I might need to take the training myself.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I did think about something. I just want to put it out. It might not be for you. It might be for the OVP. And I know that Chair Narayan might remember this. But just to put it out there, I know one of the things we advocated for in the past was some kind of follow-up for the organizations, again, in the idea that these are small but mighty organizations. We have put some advocacy around if they didn't get awarded this time, who they could come back to help them build capacity for next year's application process. Would that be within you all's office, or should I be making sure that's in OVP, that they're doing that in OVP? Okay.
OVP.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Muhammad, and again for this. And I'm just also new, and I appreciate the chairman. I think you're doing a good job. Kind of first time. I just want to flag, as they're looking at the ordinance and the resolution that was passed, which was the Prop S ordinance. If we're going to continue to follow by it, it does mention that by resolution, this committee, makes the decisions of the funds and the amount. I know we're trying to do it in a transparent way. And it also states that the BOA they're required to have the application. So I don't know if we want to, and I know Ms. Muhammad said she'll work to do that, but moving forward as we think about that, until we change the ordinance, that it is kind of requirement we get it. So it's probably good that we get those applications. I don't know, like you said, if it's number 1 through 35, but it's over to the clerk, and then so it's over to us so that we can just continue to follow it as we're trying to be transparent.
Absolutely. Well, anything further for us?
No,
Awesome.
thanks.
Well, does anyone on the committee have any, or Alderman Cohn, if you do, just give a shout. Does anyone have anything further for Ms. Muhammad? All right. Well, thank you so much. This is a much more informal meeting, so I'm not sure how to appropriately end it. So, assuming no one has any issues with signing off here.
I move forward and I move informally to adjourn this.
You have to end this meeting by saying go Cards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Or play ball.
On 3, we'll say go Cards and adjourn. 1, 2, 3, go Cards!
Go Cards!
Thank you, Ms.